Welcome to Salty Church Online. We're so glad that you're here. I'm Miles.
And I'm Corey. We're going to go right now into a time of worship, and then we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Let's do it.
Well, hey there, Salty Church. How are you guys doing? If you're able, would you stand with me? Whether you're watching in person or online, we're so glad that you're here. My name's Madison, if we haven't had the chance to meet, and we're going to sing together some worship this morning, or tonight. Let's put our hands together like this. Arise, my soul, remember this. He took my sin and he buried it. No longer I who live, now Jesus lives in me. Now I was dead in sin, but I woke up to see the light. No, I won't boast, but in the cross that saved my soul. All else is lost. The grip of fear, the grip of fear has no hold on me. So where, oh death, where is your sting? No longer I who live, now Jesus lives in me. For I was dead in sin, but I woke up to see the light. And all of this for your glory. Oh, all of this for your glory. Oh, all of this for your glory. Sing that again, all of this. Oh, all of this for your glory. Oh, all of this for your glory. All of this for your glory. Yes, is Lord. All of this for your glory. No longer I who live. Sing this out. Now Jesus lives in me. For I was dead in sin, but I woke up to see the light. Sing this out. All of this for your glory. And all of this for your glory. Yes, it is, Lord. All desire is now satisfied here in your love. Yes, there's nothing. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. No, there's nothing. 'Cause nothing is better than you. And I know it's true. And I'm not afraid, oh, to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you see them all, and you still call me friend. Yes, you still call me friend. The God of the mountain is the God of the valley. And there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, 'cause nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, 'cause nothing is better than you. And we know it's true. Can we agree with that today? 'Cause you turn mourning into dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. Will you sing that with me again? You turn mourning into dancing. Yes, He does. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. Every time, you're the only one who can. You turn grace into gardens. You turn bows into armies. 'Cause you turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Sing this with me. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing. Lay down. Better than you. Lord, there's nothing. 'Cause nothing is better than you, Jesus. There is nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. 'Cause nothing is better than you. 'Cause you turn The King of love had given up his life. The darkest day in history. There on the cross they made for sinners. For every curse his blood atoned. One final breath and it was finished. But not the end we could have known. For the earth began to shake, and the veil was torn. What sacrifice was made as the heavens roared? All hail King Jesus. All hail the Lord of heaven and earth. All hail King Jesus. All hail the Savior of the There was a moment when the sky lit up, a flash of light breaking through. When all was lost, he crossed eternity. Oh, the King of life was on the move, yeah. For in a dark, cold tomb, where our Lord was laid, one miraculous breath, and we're forever changed. We're changed forever. All hail King Jesus. All hail Lord of heaven and earth. All hail King Jesus. All hail the Savior of the world. All hail King Jesus. All hail the Lord of heaven and earth. All hail King Jesus. All hail the Savior of the world. Oh, the Savior. So let every knee come bow before the King of Kings. Let every tongue confess that He is Lord. Lift up your shout. Let us join with all of heaven singing, holy. We're singing holy. We cry out holy. Singing holy. Sing this, all hail King Jesus. All hail King Jesus. All hail the Lord of heaven and earth. All hail King Jesus. All hail the Savior of the world. Let's lift up our praise.
Well, thanks so much for singing with us. And again, we're just so excited that you chose to join us. Every week, we point your attention to what we call a connection card. And you can fill that out digitally at salty.org and just click connect. This is really the best way we know how to get you connected to next steps that you might be interested in. So if you've got motivation for that, if you want to go do that, please go to salty.org, click connect, and somebody will reach out to you and talk to you about those next steps that you're interested in.
And if you've been to salty.org, you know Easter is coming. It's real close, and we want to invite you to attend one of our services. We've got 11 different opportunities between in-person and online, including some sunrise services.
Yeah.
Also, special note this year, Ormond Beach and Flagler Beach both have new locations for their sunrise services. Ormond is going to be meeting at Granada. You could hit a golf ball there from our church, right? And Flagler, you're going to be at Veterans Memorial Park.
Yep.
So both are going to be great. NSB, tried and true, same location. All of those locations are listed right here at salty.org.
Yep, for sure. Such an awesome opportunity to invite someone.
Yeah.
And even if you've been wrestling with faith and want to take a next step, probably one of the more important steps that you could take in your faith, which is baptisms. We're going to be holding those on Easter Sunday, and if you join us at one of our
one of the sunrise services,
we can just walk right over to the beach if we're not already on it. So it's really a cool and incredible opportunity, an incredibly cool experience to be there. If you've already been baptized, even just watching is super cool, super awesome thing to be a part of. So.
Yeah, there's no better time really to get it done. I mean, all baptisms are special, but being in the crowd with those people and being there to celebrate others who are making that choice for the first time is super cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. We'd love to connect with you in a multitude of ways. One way is we're going to move into our connection time, and that kind of gives us some space, gives us an opportunity to get to know you a little better. Type in the chat or in the comments down below where you're watching from, maybe, what your name is, how long you've been watching Salty Online. We would love to know that stuff, interact with you. So you can also go to salty.org and click prayer if you need prayer, if you have a prayer request. We have a team that partners with you every week in praying for those things, those prayer requests that are submitted. And you can also take communion if you want to participate in that. Remember the sacrifice that Jesus made, and even moving into this next season, it's such a powerful time to be doing that because of Easter, you know.
Yeah.
So.
The other thing that you can do while you're at salty.org is fuel the mission through your giving.
Yeah.
One thought about that, we just wrapped up our series called Going. Some people commit to going. Pursuing their one and sharing the truth and the love of Jesus for them.
Yeah.
Prior to that, we finished the I'll Go series, which is actually what's printed on the board.
Yeah.
And the I'll Go is not just about going for the one that you know, but it's about going for the one that you don't through fueling the mission here at Salty Church.
Yeah.
We can reach so many on our own individually, but then together, corporately, what we can do for the kingdom is really powerful.
Yeah.
So that's why one of the reasons we're better together. And every time that you join with us on this mission to rescue and empower disciples for Jesus, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
So if you have any more questions about the I'll Go journey that we're on right now, or you want to get more context or see what that's all about, right here on salty.org, you click the I'll Go button, and we've got all the messages and more from that series. Really, it's set to fuel the next level of ministry here at Salty.
Yeah, and you can do that during our connection time, which we're going to jump into right now. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll connect.
Let's go.
like that. Yeah, welcome back as we get started here, transitioning into our teaching time. I want to welcome everybody here who's hanging out with us in Ormond, or everybody's watching, maybe sitting on a couch at home, or all the folks in Flagler and New Smyrna. I'm excited to have you. It's a good season, and how should I say it? And it's time. It's a new series that we are doing starting today, and it will take us through Easter, and I'm going to tell you all about that. But before I do, let me just make sure I want to highlight one element. In case you weren't here last week, really fun to see, I think, from my perspective anyways. We did I'll go into going, and the idea of going is that each one of us would be committed to helping one person find their way to Jesus. And so on all of our campuses, we have ones where we write people's names down, one person who we're helping. And then last week, at the highlight of our going series, I invited people to write their names like as a commitment of I'll go. And so there are 8 of these surfboards on all of our campuses. There are, how many is it? Ones all over the place, the 8 surfboards, hundreds of names written down, really cool. And if you missed it at all, you still have time, and you can write a name on there if you want, whether it's the one or your name, because you said I'll go. And I didn't say it last week, and I really messed up, and I'm sorry, but for all the folks watching online, people that are like out of state or out of the country, if you want your name on an I'll go board as a I'll go commitment, send us a connection card through the website. Let me know, and I'll write your name on there. So I think that's a good option. So just really cool to see on names on both sides of those boards on all of our campus, and exciting to just kind of see what that will mean here over the next couple of weeks as we go along. So big deal, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about that. So with that said, it's time. It's a new series. It's Easter and all of that. And so I want to highlight some things and really build towards, I think, what is a really important moment, and that's that Easter story. And the way I want to do it, I want to start today talking about, it's a guy. Have you ever heard of the word or the name, I got to say it right, Sisyphus? Probably hadn't heard, some of you might have. Sisyphus, which it's not like a message on STDs. I'm not saying syphilis. That's a different thing. That is not what we're doing. Sisyphus. He is part of the Greek folklore. You got like Zeus and all of that kind of stuff. These made-up folklore stories and all that. Sisyphus is a guy who lived a really, really bad life. He died, and then Hades punished him because of his bad life. This is I found this little statue kind of a thing of him. And he's known because his punishment for having such a bad life, Hades made him push this giant boulder up a hill. And there's some kind of a magic spell or something, I don't know. But as soon as he got to the top of the hill, the rock would shift and roll back down to the bottom. And then he'd have to go back to the bottom and push the thing back up the hill, and then it would go back down again. And it's like for all of eternity, he's having to push this thing up the hill and never really gets to the top. It's part of his punishment and all that kind of stuff. But with that said, I just would ask the question, do you ever feel like that? Right? You're going through life, it's hard, you're going through stuff, and you're just effort and trial and struggle, difficulty. So whether it's job, career, kind of thing, it could be health issues, relationship stuff. I mean, it could be anything, right? You ever feel like you're like just going and working? Hey, look at there. Going and working. It's dramatic. Keep our attention, right? Things happen sometimes. No, but you ever feel like that? Like to what extent, like you're just struggling and working and never really getting somewhere and never seeing the results for your efforts, that kind of thing, that feeling. Okay, and with that idea, I want to just present some things that might be helpful to you, especially as it relates to this. I take that Sisyphus and then this idea of what they call it, like a Sisyphus effect. The idea of like sometimes you're just going and working in slow momentum, nothing's happening, and then ultimately what you'll want is you get to a point where you get paid off for all of your hard efforts. Right? Where all of the hard work, all of your faithfulness, finally, when you get to this tipping point, then, things get easier. You see the results of your hard work and all of that. And there is always another hill. But if even as there's another hill, at least you've got momentum going into the next hill. right? And so, but the point is, and why I'm telling you all of this, is you really want to get to that not the, because sometimes that at the top it could be a flat section, right? For miles at a time, where it's just flat. It's not as hard as it was, but you're still not, benefiting from all your heart. But you want to get to that one point, and there's that moment, what they call a tipping point. That moment which, there we go, finally. Right? That's what you want. Now, if we were talking about like career success and finances or whatever, I would say things like, way too many times people never get to hear because they quit too soon because it's just too hard. Right? And we can use all kinds of analogies in that, but ultimately, of course, we're a church and all of that. And so, what are the impacts of this as we think about it and frame it in terms of our faith? There are times when living for God and staying faithful is just hard. And even the Sisyphus idea is like there's temptation and sin and all of that, and you end up starting back at the bottom again, and you're like struggling and working all of that. Well, I want to help you in that, and one way of doing that is by looking at some of the Easter story. I want to tell you at least really for the next 3 weeks, two of the, I think, most important tipping points in all of history. That point where things dramatically changed right after that moment. There's probably more than two, but I'm talking about two of the most important ones, and the one being Passover, all the way back in Exodus chapter 3 and 4, in the story of Moses. And in that story, the Passover it sets the stage for the greatest tipping point in all of history, which is the resurrection of Jesus. And so I'm going to put both of those together here today, and then next week focus quite a bit more on the Passover element, and we're going to have a special time with communion next week. And then the Easter story, of course, the greatest that moment where everything changes with the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So I kind of frame it all together, and it's about that time. It's time when things change. And what I hope to do is be able to show you why Passover and Easter should matter to you in the midst of whatever struggle you may be dealing with even now. So I hope to wrap that all together. So here's the way we're going to do it. Let me start with the Passover element. I'm going to run through some history pretty quick, hit the highlights of some things to just show you, because the Passover story is a critical tipping point in history, but really that element brings power and weight, significance to the more important one, which is the resurrection story. So in Exodus 3, for instance, this is the point at which the people of Israel have been in Egypt for 400 years. So you're talking about struggle and never seeing results, and struggle and working as a slave, working for someone else and never getting benefit to yourself. I mean, that's like the ultimate, right? But God, having recognized his people in struggle, he goes to Moses and said, listen, I've seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I've heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yet I am aware of their suffering. So they're working, and that boulder keeps rolling back down. They never really get anywhere. 400 years. But then, at just the right time, so he sends Moses. So he says, listen, I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians, and I will lead them out of Egypt to their own place and to have their own land. And so the rescue is, at this point in history, God sends Moses to make this happen. This becomes the beginning of this tipping point. And so with that, let me just remind you too, whenever you see Old Testament stories with nations, those are foreshadowing of what is to come. Where in the New Testament, we have spiritual lessons with individuals. So, for instance, the people of Egypt, slavery, struggle. I would say for you, is there a heavy struggle, that burden that you are wrestling with and you need freedom from today? So in the same way, God hears and God understands, and when the time is right. In this case, in this Old Testament story, it was Moses. Moses goes to Egypt and talks to the Pharaoh and says, "Listen, you got to let these people go. You got to let them out of there." And when he gets to Egypt, he's talking to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh's like, "I've got free labor, like hundreds of thousands of workers that work for free. I'm not letting anybody go." He's like, "Listen, God said, and you need to obey." Fast forward, I'm telling you the highlights really quick. He tells them, and Pharaoh says no, and the people say no. So, as a message to the people, God says, all right, and then there's the plagues. So I don't know if you know the story, but there were plagues. There were, at this point, we'll say 9 in a row, like a plague of gnats, like Florida on a really bad day, but worse, right? But just like an infestation of this horrible gnats, and then he let my people go. He says no, and then flies. I can't imagine how bad that would be. Frogs, locusts, like 9 seasons of terrible things where God's warning Egypt and saying, listen, hear what I've got to say. Hear me now, listen. And 9 times they're like, no, we're not doing it. And then finally God says, okay, one last try. Moses tells the Pharaoh, here's what the Lord says. At midnight today, I will pass through the heart of Egypt. So this is the 10th one. After 9 warnings, here's what he says. He said, on this night, he said, all of the firstborn sons will die in every family in Egypt, from the oldest son of Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the oldest son of the lowliest servant girl who grinds flour. For even the firstborn of all the livestock are going to die. So this judgment of death on all of the people. Little side note, little tangent here. This is often the point where some people, especially new to faith, will say, that's why I don't like the Old Testament God. He's mean. It's perfectly understandable, right? We're talking about everybody, firstborn, even the animals, are going to be cut down and dead. It's a terrible judgment for sure. But is he a mean God? Well, don't forget, there were 9 times when he's like, hey, listen, pay attention. Hey, listen. He's trying to warn. He gives them the message they continue to ignore. But not only were there the 9 plagues, but then he also gave really all of them a way out to escape the judgment. So he's like, this is what's going to happen. I'm warning you. And here's how, if you'll listen, if you'll obey, here's how you can skip that judgment. So he tells everybody, the whole Israel, he said, take a lamb or a young goat, and then you're to take some of its blood and smear it on the sides and the top of the door frames of the house where you're going to eat the animal. So the big thing is you're going to spread this blood across the door frames of the house. Okay? And then on that night, I will pass through the land of Egypt and strike down all the firstborn, like I said. I will bring judgment against all of the gods of Egypt because I am the Lord. So not only did he give them the 9 plagues to warn them all, but he also says if you do this, then you will be able to escape that punishment. He says the blood on the doorpost will serve as a sign. It will serve as a sign marking the houses where you're staying. And I will pass over you. Hence, Passover. So judgment's coming, but if there's the blood, then God passes by and you're safe. And so that is the beginning of which, and I'm going to highlight a little bit more next week about Passover. But that's the broad story of the Passover. After 400 years, at just the right time, God rescues. And the people are saved by the blood. That sets the stage for the next big tipping point, which is Jesus. So after the people escape Egypt, they find their way to the promised land. Fast forward 1,500 years. The people of Israel have got a long history at this point, and they're going about and doing all that they're supposed to do, but then there's problems. Most of the Old Testament describes a lot of that. But then, after 400 years of silence and then oppression by Rome, the people are crying out to God, God save us, we need a hero, somebody save us. Jesus comes. Similar to Moses, but Moses was a physical story of escaping slavery and finding freedom. Jesus is a spiritual story about spiritual freedom. And Jesus comes and sets the stage and lives his life. And at the end of his ministry, he celebrates the Passover meal as required by the law, but then does something new. So let me read you this. This is Luke 22. It says that when the time came, part of our theme, right? At the right time, in this case, 1,500 years ago, then at the right time of Jesus' ministry, then he gets his apostles together and they sit down. He's like, listen, I've been ready to eat this Passover meal with you. So what are they doing? They're remembering what God had did 1,500 years earlier as the law required them to do it. So they've got all the food laid out and the meal, and then he does something different. He takes the bread He breaks it into pieces. He said, hey, hear this. This is my body, which is given to you. Do this and remember. So they're used to these kinds of ceremonial things and remembrance and signs. He takes the bread and he says, "This," and prophetically, this is what's about to happen here. Much like the lamb that was slain, so would he. But then after supper, he took another cup of wine. He said, this is a new covenant. So new, in other words, I'm starting something new, so you don't have to do the Passover stuff anymore, which is why we don't, we want to make sure we know what it's all about, but we don't celebrate Passover anymore because there's a new covenant, an agreement confirmed by his blood. So like the first lamb, Jesus' blood is shed, such that as a people, we can not only find freedom from so much of the difficulties and struggles of life, but also that we find ultimately that judgment passes over us as a people. And so we have these two moments in all of history that are quite significant. The tipping point for all of the people of Israel after 400 years of slavery, then Moses, the lamb and the blood. And then after 1,500 years, at just the right time, Jesus. It's sacrifice and then the blood. Freedom. And all of these things, these pictures and these imageries, these stories, should have and maybe an impact on any of us. So think about it this way. What is a spiritual Egypt for you? If Egypt is a metaphor of difficulty, struggle, slavery. Not that any of us have any kind of physical slavery, but addiction is a slavery. All kinds of addiction, as we know, pornography and spending and sexual things, and much less all of some of the emotional struggles and difficulties that we all wrestle with: anger, fear, guilt, shame. You know, or what is that? What is your burden? Where is it you need to find freedom? Because the God of all of history is the same God of Egypt, the same God that was, Jesus, is relevant to us, to any one of us today. And so what is your burden? What is that struggle where you need that help, that you need to be able to get through? It's like, recognizing that what God is offering us is an opportunity. And we either stay in Egypt, like a slave, or we can live free. Continue to be a victim of things rather than maybe to find victory. Sometimes live in ways that seem just pitiful and like helpless versus powerful. And where Jesus is the one who is that tipping point. I was thinking about that. Thinking about that Sisyphus, that story, this burden, this struggle. And maybe yours is giant and insurmountable. Maybe it's small. Take a small little pebble and stick it in your shoe and see how well that does you. Right? A small thing every day can be just as painful, right? So what is your struggle? What is your burden? Knowing that Jesus wants us to find freedom in it. I think about Matthew 11, for instance, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." He's like, take. He's used the idea of yoke. So it's like you got these oxen or cows that would have a yoke. It's like, take my yoke, learn from me. He said, and you will find rest for your souls. For what I've got is easy. My burden is light. So why don't you take easy and light, and I'll take the hard stuff, is what Jesus is saying. I was thinking about that scripture and going back to this here, where how so many of us sometimes have a religious mindset about, I got to do certain things, I got to live a certain way, I've got to carry his weight, I've got to deal with these things, I've got to manage it, I've got to be the right kind of person for the people around me, but I also got to perform for God so that God will love me or bless me along some way, right? And so many times even religion is this. And Jesus doesn't say, "Hey, you get close to the top, I'll help you over I'll push it down. I'll be your tipping point." I was thinking about it like from that first graphic here. Jesus is like, all right, keep going. And once you get here, then you'll, after you've worked really hard and done all the right things, then things will get better for you. That's not what Jesus says. Not at all. In fact, he's like, when you're at the bottom of the hill again, why don't you give it to me? I'll take it. And then come and follow me, and I will give you rest. That's what he offers. And it only is possible at just the right time when, in fact, I would say this, for the tipping point for Israel was Moses coming into the scene, and then Jesus, for all that he did as tipping point. But I think personally, for any of us at any time, maybe the great tipping point is not when we do something, but then we put our faith in the one who does everything. That tipping point is when you say, God, I'm going to trust you with my stuff. Take it. Now, there's more beyond that. In fact, we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that right after Easter. We've got an 8-week series that we're going to do, helping you understand what next, what's after that. Okay, but the tipping point is always, whether you're new to faith or you've been around 100 years, right, is always, God, I'm going to trust you with my thing today. And when you come to that moment of decision, then that's that tipping point that you need. We'll talk about what's next after that, but to be there. And so, I want to challenge you in that and invite you. And invite also to a couple other things, too. Part of it's, again, trusting God with one more thing again. Or maybe trusting God for the first time today. But also remember, too, like we talked about in terms of this whole season that's coming up, one thing maybe also, we've got a baptism service coming up, Easter. So on our website, you can go on there, you go right now if you want, salty.org. You'll see all of our, there's 11 worship opportunities we have across all of our venues. And Easter morning is a great time. It's a new season, new life, new birth. Baptism is an opportunity. We've already got more than 30 people signed up, and I'm expecting dozens and dozens more. And I was preparing and thinking about it, and I've never said this out loud yet, but man, how cool it would be if to see 100. I think this might be the year for 100 on Easter. How awesome that would be, right? I think it's cool. Now, it's not my job to make that happen. Fortunately, it's God does his work, and we get to celebrate the results of what he's doing. But if you're ready for that, or if you're helping someone else take a step of faith, this is maybe another opportunity for you as a tool to find that freedom or to help somebody else find it. So with that said, for today, let me just let you sit with this. What is the struggle? And you've got something giant or small, either way. What is it you need to trust God with a little, and maybe in a new way? And then put your faith in him in that. Say, God, I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to like, whether it's repent or change or let go of, God, I'm going to trust you with this. And God, may Jesus be that tipping point there where you find that freedom. So what is that? So sometimes, and I don't think we did it in the last couple weeks, but we do with our reflection time, an opportunity to talk. So before we head out, how might you apply something? And the application may be very specific to you about your struggle, or maybe it's about you're helping someone else in this. Either way, let's reflect on that. Talk about it. Flag the New Smyrna here in Ormond. Feel free to chat for a little bit. And then once our reflection time is up, I'll come back, and then we got one more thing here, and then we'll be ready to go, okay? So let's talk about this.